Hey everyone, it's Dez and Marco with After School with the Admins. Thank you for tuning in. Please like and subscribe, share with a friend. Here's our newest episode.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of After School with the Admins. I'm your host, Marco Torillo, and I'm here with my co-host,
Des Caldwell. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are, whatever time it is. Welcome to the show. We've got a great guest here. Marco, I'll let you do the introductions.
All right, we are joined all the way from Kansas, a former Kansas High School Principal of the Year, professional speaker, professional principal, fantastic human being. We have Todd Dain. Dr. Todd Dain, thank you so much for joining us today.
Marco, Des, I appreciate the opportunity. I always get excited to share and to learn as we collaborate. And the more that I build my own personal professional network, the more I grow. So that's what it's about.
That's awesome. We love getting a chance to speak with individuals from all across the nation and hearing about all the great things they're doing. Well, we'd like to start off always with the same question for all of our guests. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into education and your educational journey.
Yeah, so my educational journey is not necessarily unique, but for me, it was a pretty powerful experience for me. I had an opportunity. I grew up in a very small town, and for me, I'm the youngest of 28 cousins, and
you say that number one more time?
I'm the youngest of 28 cousins, and so most of my adolescence was spent on my uncle's dairy farm, and I was the youngest, so I wasn't quite big enough to throw the hay onto the trailer. But I was the one on top of the trailer stacking the hay bales, and I was the one up at the top of the hay barn battling the black snakes and the wasp to try to play that giant game of Tetris of stacking the hay bales. And my cousin drove the bobcat in the milk barn, the bobcat that kind of cleared out all the manure. And my job was to follow my cousin in the bobcat with a shovel and shovel manure. So for me, youngest of 28 cousins, but the only one with a degree. And so for me, it was my teachers, my coaches that inspired me to do something else. They taught me that I could do anything I want. I could be anything I want if I worked hard enough for it. And the power in that was remarkable because they believed in me and gave me an opportunity and changed my life. And when I was in the situation with a single parent home and that's all I had. And so they inspired me to be something different and be something greater than I was. And so it's been my motivation and my passion to try to give back to young people the way that my teachers, my coaches, my administrators gave to me. And so for me, I started teaching 31 years ago now in education. I started teaching and coaching, and I was a head football coach for 14 years. And I taught AP Lit for 20 years and was loving my role as a teacher and a coach. And I had a principal at the time. She was a wonderful mentor, Dr. Gwen Poss. She sat me down. I was 40, and she sat me down and she says, "Todd, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And long story short, she looked me in the eye and she said, "You need to be a building principal, and I'm going to prepare you to do that." So she created an administrative position for me. And long story short, 2 years later, I got a call that said, "Hey, position of principal at Shawnee Mission South is posted, and we think you'd be a good candidate." And so 2 years later, I landed the job as head principal at Shawnee Mission South High School, and I've been here now for 11 years. So for me, it's been a really transformational experience for my career, but one that is always student-centered, and trying to spend my time and energy giving back to young people the best I can.
That's awesome. That's a great story. And we tend to have a reoccurring statement that always comes in with this, where there's always an individual that finally sits someone down or nudges them into that direction, or tells them this is what you really should be doing in life, or lets them know they can be more than what others may have thought they can be. And it's always great to hear that there's always that thing, because we always make the statement about that education's a calling. It's gimmicky, if you will, if you want to hear that people say, it's like sappy that someone will always say, oh, being an educator is a calling. But it really is. If you listen to any person who makes that choice to do it, whether it's an individual who was not a great student in school, was not a person who wanted to be in education, or it is the person who loved school from the very get-go, there's always somebody who pushes them in that right direction, because they see that it factor to say that you need to be this. Like, we need someone like you to keep this going in the right direction. And it's just always awesome to hear. That's why we love that first question, because everyone's story is different, but it always seems to have that one little thing that says, this person helped me become the person I am today. So we love that. We think it's always a great moment.
Absolutely. And Dr. Poss is one of my all-time favorites, but I've got some others too, along the way that helped me grow in the process. But she's the one that really amplified my growth to step into this role. And, I thought, maybe I'll transition to be an athletic director. Maybe I'll be an assistant. And so I was an assistant principal for 2 years before I became the principal.
The coach was coached.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's cool. I still have former players and former students that still message me and call me coach. And I've got 20 years of memories for that. And that's very near and dear to my heart, because my coaches were special for me.
So Marco was a coach. I also coached as well. Talk to us about leaving coaching behind. This is an assumption on my part, but where we are, once you become an administrator, you're not allowed to coach anymore, right? I mean, certainly you can coach outside of your school, rec leagues and, coach your own kids, I think is where a lot of us get our fix. But like being the head football coach, like as far as coaches go on campus, right? Like you're the big dog. What is it like leaving that behind and taking on, the role of an assistant principal?
Yeah, that was certainly a shift for me. But I would say this, I spent 14 years as a head football coach, and loved my time as a football coach. Loved it when I finished it, and it was a big transition for me to step away from that role. But in the end, my last year as head football coach, I was also the head track coach, and I was teaching college prep English, and the same principal who inspired me to become a principal, she's the one that says, hey, Todd, I need you to teach an hour of weights, and then I also need you to be the department chair for the English department. And this is a 6A high school with 2,000 students, right? And so I go, Gwen, I can't do all that. I can't do all of that and do it well and do it right. And that's when she says, she looked at me and she said, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she says, you have all the tools and all the skills to be a great leader. And that's why I'm asking you to help me in all these different areas and do these things. And so that's when it was a pretty big shift for me. And to be honest with you, it was a lot of heavy conversations with my wife too. So my wife I call her the real Dr. Dain. She was a doctor long before I was, but she's a school superintendent. She's not my superintendent, but she's been a superintendent. She was a principal, for 15, 20 years before she was a superintendent. And so a lot of heavy conversations with her and gleaning some wisdom from her along the way. And it was a time in our family, we've got 3 children, a time in our family when My oldest was getting ready to transition into high school, and our younger two were involved in all kinds of athletics and activities. And so it was a good time for our family for me to step away. And I don't know about you guys, but when I stopped coaching and teaching and I became an administrator, I gained a lot of time for my family, because the amount of time that I spent as a teacher and a coach, not even close to the amount of time that I spend now as an administrator. I mean, I spent so much more time as a coach, so much more time as a teacher than I do as an administrator in this job. And that's why, because I think to do those jobs right, to give great feedback to writers on their essays, to watch game film and do all the hours in the summer, to do those things right, you have to dedicate all kinds of hours that you're never paid to do. And so as an administrator, it's a lot of hours, but it's not even close to the amount of hours that I would spend as a teacher and a coach. So it was good. It was good in a lot of ways for our family as well.
Would you say, oh, sorry, one follow-up to that. I wonder, is it really about saying that you found more time or you found boundaries better? Because I wonder with that statement, just because hearing the things that you said there about the time that you have to take to go and work with someone, because you feel to make them better, you have to go spend that extra hour, do this, spend that extra time to go through that essay and go through.
Yeah.
Is it when you step into the administrative role, you look back at it and you realize like where you need to hit that break button and kind of be like, this is where we got to stop for the day. And we got to understand it'll be there tomorrow. And we can move to the next and to the next and understand that piece, because it's a broader scale. You're seeing, the way I look is like you're seeing the whole board versus kind of the focus on each thing individually as difference. That was for me, at least. I think I found better boundaries. I still don't have good ones, but I think I found better boundaries when I became an admin versus when I was coaching and doing those pieces. Now, Des, your turn to go and contradict my statements.
I mean, you asked Dr. Dain. I don't know if you want me to jump in before you answer. Marco and I like to disagree with each other. But I also became an administrator earlier in my career than you did, Marco. And I mean, there were no boundaries. It was to me, it was more pressure. Because now not only were, when I was a teacher, I had 150 students, right? Now I have, whatever grade levels I'm with or whatever part of the alphabet I'm with, all those kids are mine, plus every teacher in the building, plus every other staff member in the building. And now I have to, number one, I was young, so I had to prove to them, right? I'd been teacher of the year, but they didn't care. And nor should they have cared, right? Like, what can you do for me, though?
Right.
Did what you did in the classroom, will that translate to what I'm doing? Right? You saw English. What can you tell me about a science classroom? Don't you dare come in and give me some garbage feedback.
Right.
Right. Like, what your feedback had better be making me better, or don't waste either one of our time. Don't do this as just checking a box. If you're going to do this, right? Young punk, if you're going to do this, you had better be good at doing it, or just take the kids out of my classroom who are making it hard for me, and I'll handle this. And so for me, it wasn't like I hope now I respect my own time and set up boundaries far better, but that wasn't the case for me. Dr. Dain, what do you think?
Well, I think when you're coaching, it's just different, because at 240, you're walking out to the practice field regardless. You don't have a choice, right? And or you're walking to the track or whatever. I used to joke with my wife and the real Dr. Dain. She's a lot smarter than I am. But every year, every springtime, usually about the league track meet time, she'd call me on 7:30 on a Friday night at the league track meet, and she'd say, "When is track over?" And she already knew the answer to that question. And I would say, "Well, honey, are you talking about tonight, or are you talking about the season?" And because I'd been coaching track for 20 years, but she was the one at home with 3 little kids that were battling all those things. And when you're coaching track, football, baseball, whatever you're doing, you can't leave a track meet when you want to. You can't leave a football game when you want to, or football practice. And so you're punching the clock. As an administrator, as a principal, I've got a lot more control over my clock. I got a lot more control over what nights I'm going to be out and how does that work with my family priorities. My youngest daughter just finished her collegiate career as a Division II soccer player. And she was team captain and in all conference and all those things. And I was able to make room in my schedule so that I was at every one of her games, because I could adjust my schedule, my priorities. I could get away from the building. I could reschedule those night duties with my team so that I wouldn't miss her games. You can't do that when you're coaching high school football or coaching high school track and doing all the things that go with that. So I guess in that regard, the big change for me was that I don't know if I was able to reset my boundaries, but I was in more control of my clock every day, every week.
Would you say your coaching helped with the transition to being an administrator?
100%. Absolutely. I think in some ways being a head coach is sometimes more difficult than being an administrator. The biggest difference is that you have different conversations as an administrator. I think one of the things that has kept me in this seat here is my affection for young people and the relationships that I still build with young people every day as a high school principal. And, I relish those opportunities to connect with young people. And, but you also know as an administrator, a lot of the times we get to deal with adults, and adulting is hard for people. And I think the most difficult part about our job as administrators is when we have to have difficult conversations with adults. Young people relatively are easy. And if you share with a young person that you love them unconditionally and work to help them through their behavior, work to help them through their scenario, that they'll grow and they'll change. Adults are a little more difficult sometimes to navigate.
So the two things that, coaching and leading, being a school leader, both are obviously leading. A lot has to do with building culture and making those kind of connections. So we know a big area of your leadership is around building culture. And there's I believe, a 5-step process. You want to share that with us?
Well, yeah, I've had a lot of opportunities to talk about our culture, and I'm even obnoxious in how we speak to our culture here at Shawnee Mission South. And I believe that this is really from my coaching background as well, but culture eats strategy for breakfast every day. We can't talk about improving instruction. We can't talk about improving test scores. We can't talk about improving outcomes until we start with our culture. And so we spend a lot of time and energy talking about culture, and we learn about culture. We talk about culture. We preach about culture in overt and covert ways. And so we talk about how climate impacts culture, but I'm very obnoxious and overt when we talk about our culture at Shawnee Mission South. We have a unique diversity. We're a large 6A high school in the state of Kansas, and we have families in Leawood that live in $4 or $5 million homes. Travis Kelsey lives 3.7 miles from my office. And then we have families on the other side of our district who are homeless. And at Shawnee Mission South, we have a unique demographic, 38% free and reduced lunch. We are 34% minority, and we celebrate our diversity every day. And we want to make sure that every child feels like they belong here at Shawnee Mission South. So we spend a lot of time, and I'm obnoxious and overt when we talk about our culture. But the reality is culture lives in the covert places in your building. It lives in the staff room. It lives in the classrooms. It lives in the meeting rooms and the coaches' offices in your building. And the adults are the ones that have to carry that culture. And so we spend a lot of time defining that. And I was overtly preaching about culture before we even knew what it was. And so it started with our staff, and we talk a lot about how we define our culture at Shawnee Mission South. And that began really back in 2018 when I started our Champion of Culture Award. I created a crazy logo, and we printed it on a foam board, and my shop teacher built a frame for it. And we started crowning a champion of culture every month. And one teacher chooses a colleague to recognize, to celebrate how they promote a positive culture for young people in our building. And that was such a cheap, silly thing that we started, but it has grown over the years, and it has become the most coveted thing in our building. And it continues to grow with our staff. In fact, just recently, my yearbook teacher sponsor was the winner of the Champion of Culture Award. And it was his job to choose the person for the next month. And he came to my office and he goes, Todd, I don't know who to choose for the next month's Champion of Culture. And I said, there's a lot who are deserving. And he said, oh, I know. He said, I asked all of my students. I asked 150 students who I should choose for this award next month. And my students gave me 52 names of teachers that deserve this award. And I sat back and I thought, wow, that's a powerful piece. And that's where it starts with the adults. And then the student voice part of it is kind of the next step of it. How do we involve student voice? And the one thing I've learned about our students is that it's not enough just to listen. You have to be intentional about reaching all students to make sure that their voices are heard and they have a place to share their perspectives about improving our school and improving our culture. And so a few years ago, I had a principal's cabinet, and it was NHS kids and the Stuco kids and the great kids in your school, right? But it wasn't a cross section of our demographic. And so I said, you know what, I've got to change this. And I talked to some other principals and learned from some of their ideas. And so what I did was I started with recommendations from coaches and sponsors, and they knew that I wanted to get a diverse cross section of who we are. And so we started a new principals cabinet. I called it my culture keepers. And they're the ones that really came to me. And I said, you guys know I'm obnoxious when I talk about culture. And they kind of roll their eyes and laugh and giggle, and that's just who they are. But I said, I want you guys to define what that is. And so a couple of years ago, our culture keepers crafted our Raider core values around our culture. And that's being respectful, being resilient, being engaged, and being inclusive. And that's who we were going to be. And they're the ones that came to me and said, well, Dr. Dain, you guys have a champion of culture for teachers. We want to have a champion of culture trophy for students. And so we came up with a process of how we nominate one another, and it's based on acts of kindness and how we promote that. We have a big champion of culture celebration at the end of the year's assembly, and we bring them out onto the gym floor and celebrate one person who is our champion of culture every year, one student who's our champion of culture every year. And so those are just a few ways that we try to promulgate that belief system here at Shawnee Mission South. And I could go through a lot of other details of other things that we do, but those are the two big ways I think that we promote that culture in a positive way.
I love that you looked at your principal's cabinet, as you were calling there, and taking a look look at who was on it, and realize that the students you had, it didn't really make up your entire demographic of kids. That is a huge step in culture I think many people don't see. when they realize that the individuals that they're stating, who could be causing the issues in the building or could be not performing academically or are middle of the pack students that people see spotlights and glimmers in them, but don't say anything about it because they think, well, they don't really want to push to get to that. Right. You made that choice to go and look at those students to give them that opportunity. And a statement I was at a professional learning one time that someone made was, I'm not looking for student leaders. I'm looking for students who lead. Mm. And when they made that statement, I thought about it for a while because it goes, we all have the student leaders. Those are the ones who are on your student council, your valedictorian. They're the individuals who are going to do fine. They're going to do amazing things. They have the drive in themselves. They're not the individual, though, who can turn a class around either negatively or positively. They're not the individual who is in the lunchroom that everyone's flocking to. Sometimes they are, but for the most part, they're not that individual. The students who lead are all those ones in that middle area who are, for good or for worse, they're bringing others with them because they have something in them that make them want others. And I love the fact that you took that idea and were able to try and build through that, because that is a core belief I find in culture that allows for really growth to happen, is when you can lock those kids in and help them to see the power they have in themselves is huge. And I do love the fact that you celebrated your own staff on it too, because I think that's a big component, because you allowed them to celebrate each other, which we know with anything that's going to work inside a school, it can't be just the admin saying it. It's got to be a belief system from within, because It's easier for a staff member to talk on something. They can chew on that and they can digest that, versus when it's us coming in and saying something, or at the same time, it can be something more when they've now officially believe in it too. And now they can move forward. And I think that is great. I love the fact that you use those things to build that culture.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's an exciting place to be, and we feel pretty good about some of the steps we've made in the area of culture. And like I said, I get obnoxious when we talk about it, and it fires me up.
What was it about your school when you started this that made you want to do it? Like, you were able to say what you did to start it, but like, what was it that you walked into your building and it was just that like, I can almost, I feel it. It's like it's in your stomach. Like, you're walking in, it's like something's not sitting with me well in what's happening here. It doesn't mean your building had issues, but it just, something wasn't sitting well. What was that with you that started to get that feeling to go, I got to do something here. Something needs to change.
Yeah. It was, let me preface this by saying, so 11 years ago, I walked in the door, and Shawnee Mission South was built in 1966. And this year we're celebrating 60 years at Shawnee Mission South High School. So in 60 years, there have been 5 principals. I'm number 5.
Wow.
So, and I've been here 11 years, and I'm not the longest tenured principal, right? Wow. So it's pretty remarkable. I think
Steelers of schools.
Yeah. So let me preface that by saying this has been a good place for a long time, right? And back in the 80s, it was a camel out on the hill and all the things. But when I got to school, got to this building, it was a tough place morale-wise. I was one of 69 administrators that came into our district. We have 5 large high schools in our school district, and one of 69 administrators that were brought in along with the new superintendent and his team. And so there was a little bit of house cleaning. And at the time, they had made the decision it wasn't my decision, but it was the decision that was made that teachers were going to go from teaching 5 classes to teaching 6. And so when I got to my building, the morale was low because teachers were just working their knuckles to the bone and working harder. They weren't working smarter. They didn't know how to work, and it's not their fault. It was just something that was thrown at them. And so it initially started from that feeling when I walked in the building, but then also from our student body and our students that were active. So many of our students that were involved in athletics activities and co-curricular performing arts were our students of privilege. And our students that were disadvantaged and our students of minorities weren't involved. And that hurt my heart. And so I said, look, we've got to do something here to start celebrating who we are. And we've got to recognize our students for all the great things that they bring to the table. And it starts with listening, but I think it's also about being very intentional. And I was very intentional. I said, look, we didn't have a black student union. And I was adamant. I said, I'm going to start a black student union. And I don't know how to start it. I don't know who to start it, but we're going to start a black student union. And that's how we began kind of working through that. And now we have, a host of every affinity group that you can imagine. We have a Jewish student union. We have an Asian student association. We have an OLA club. We have LGBTQ group. I mean, we have as many affinity groups as possible to try to celebrate that diversity and recognize those students need to be connected. And so I'm real passionate about this message. And this is what I shared at the beginning. It's what I echo to my teachers every day is we love all kids. So now some days we don't like them. Some days we don't like their behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And some days some of our cherubs are hard to love, but we love them all unconditionally. And when we need to help them with their behavior, we need to help them grow. We're going to help them, but we're going to love them all for who they are. And continue to help them grow. And that's the message that we echo over and over again. So that's kind of where it came from when I walked in the building. We had a positive school. We had positive achievement scores, all the things that you might imagine, but it just didn't feel like home for so many of our students. At least to me, it didn't feel that way. And so I wanted all of our staff members to feel like this was a destination location. It was a place where they were going to come and live and stay. And then I wanted our students to feel the same.
Dr. Dain, how long? So you've been there 11 years, you said. How long before you started looking at creating affinity groups?
It was probably a good year and a half into it, 2 years into it. It wasn't until my second year that we had 3 or 4 affinity groups that were strong and thriving. And that was a struggle. The other thing that we did is that we started looking at belonging long before DEI came out. And we began training our staff in making sure that our staff were trained in trauma-informed care. And, we've done the ACEs training and how we handle young people that have been through all kinds of trauma before they come to us, and students in poverty. And then in addition to that, obviously looking at how we can welcome all students, no matter their race, creed, background, all of those things. We want them all to feel like this is a home for them. And so we've been very intentional with our training, with our staff. And as much as possible, guys, I'm an old white guy. So I try to find staff members who can help me lead that and can provide that relevant voice, because it doesn't do much good for me to stand in front of everyone and pontificate about what we should do. We try to, I lean into our culture keepers to do some training for our staff. We let our young people lead professional development for our adults. And that's been one of the more powerful things that we've been able to do over the years. And we continue to try to amplify that. And our students will go to the middle school and the elementary schools and lead some of their staffs as well. Awesome. And so just trying to amplify those opportunities for our young people to grow, and with the same idea that as adults, we got to grow.
So I appreciate that. And to hear when you were doing the work, because I'm thinking about that time frame, 10 years ago, I was doing the work as well. And there was a lot of pushback. As a matter of fact, just the mention of affinity groups, like I'm already imagining when we start posting clips, if this ends up being one of the clips, there are going to be people in the comments who are like, who want to go back to, when we back in the day when we were questioning why all the kids of color were sitting together in the cafeteria and how we needed to break them up and sit them with other groups, and the idea of an affinity group being the opposite of what we should be doing in public schools. So it's refreshing to hear that within just a couple years of starting, we're talking essentially 10 years ago doing this work. I have to imagine there was pushback, whether it was verbal or whether it was murmurs and back rooms. There had to have been some pushback. Did you ever feel the pushback, and how did you respond to that?
To be honest with you, this is a great community, and they've been supportive all the way through. I think there's a reason that there's only been 5 principals in 60 years, because there's always been a level of trust. I think long before I got here, I think there's a level of trust between our community and the administration at the school and the staff at the school. So to be honest with you, I didn't get a lot of pushback, and it wasn't overnight, Desmond. I mean, it was a thing that we started. I came in and we started with the shared belief that we're here for every child, that we love all kids. And it took us a while. It took us a year and a half to really build that consensus as a staff. Our mission, our vision, that we believe that all students can and will learn. All students can and will learn. And so I think that's where it starts from. And everyone knew my stance on that. And so if there was murmurs in the back rooms, it didn't make it to me. So in that regard, I would say the staff was really supportive. Our community has been really supportive over the time. But again, it wasn't Todd Dain talking about it. It was me finding those teachers in my building that could help be that voice.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So like I said, it doesn't make sense for an old white guy to stand up and talk about all these things. I had to find some teacher leaders and some student leaders to help provide that voice. And it's a lot more powerful when it comes from them rather than coming from me.
But I'm sure they knew that you stood behind it and supported it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I had some of them pushing me to, like, Todd, hey, we need to start doing this. I mean, I had some of them that were pushing me to do better and to learn more. And so that, there's a lot of those teachers that I can think back to, and there's a lot of those former students that I can think back to. And I really appreciate them pushing me to grow and to be courageous in sharing some of these things and being able to support our staff moving forward with that.
Awesome.
And I'm happy to hear the fact that when push came to shove on that one, you listened, because that's important. As we know, as being all administrators, like, you have to welcome that. You have to welcome that ability to allow someone to disagree with what we're saying, but also to be able to listen to it and maybe realize we might not be right at that moment, and take that feedback and be able to go, okay, you're right. How do we work on this? Let's talk this out. Because that's a key to it also. You were able to recognize, as you put it, like, I'm an old white male. Like, I am not the right person to maybe start this. It didn't mean that you were going to not help, not support, but you might not be the face of it. And as the leader of your building, yes, you should be a face of it, but sometimes you got to also know when to take a step behind someone and go, I'm going to let this person speak. And I'm here because I believe what this person's saying. And I think that supports it in the same way. And like you said, like, they pushed you, they were able to get you out of your comfort zone even too, and realize, okay, I'm not sure about this, but I got to get muddy too. I got to figure it out. And I think that's a key. That's a key to a good leader also, when you think of those pieces.
Yeah. And I've been real fortunate too, because I've had, I've got 4 associate principals, and I've had some turnover over the years, and I can say, fortunately, that most of my former assistants are now principals in their own buildings and have been promoted out, and a couple that are assistant superintendents now. But I think back to those people and how I benefited because they were part of my team and what I learned from them. So guys, I can't take all the credit for that because it's been a group effort, and I think back to some of my former associates who are now leading and thriving in their own buildings, and a lot of that growth is because of them too.
You've talked a lot dealing with trust. You keep saying that inside of the presentation that we've kind of been talking about here, our podcast, and dealing with about culture wins is the area that you've been speaking on. But one thing you talk about is trust and trust killers. Can you give us a little bit of information on that and like where this list came from and what that entails on each side?
Yeah. So a lot of this came from Jim Schwanke, and I don't know if you've ever heard her speak, but she's the one that kind of shared a lot of these strategies on how to navigate and build trust and understanding what some of those trust killers are as well. And so a lot of that I learned from her, from podcasts and webinars and conversations with her, and being able to avoid some of those trust killers, focus on some of those trust builders as we go through it. But so I've got a list of trust builders and trust killers that I've shared and talked about before. And some of them are common sense, but some of them, as a leader, you have to sit back and say, you know what? Yeah, I need to be intentional about this conversation. I need to be intentional about how I respond or how I'm proactive with this so that I can maximize that trust and avoid any of those trust killers. So that's kind of where it came from. But it starts again with just listening. And I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in being a leader and being a go-getter and all the things. Like, so most principals, most leaders got that position because they worked harder, they hustled harder, they studied faster than their colleagues. And as you know, leadership isn't like that. Leadership isn't a to-do list that you just check off as fast as you can. Leadership, there's an art to it. And so I think sometimes we get caught up in going too fast, and sometimes we just need to slow down and listen. So but that's where it came from. I can't say that I created all these ideas.
One area that I had with it was the fact of you talk about avoiding difficult conversations.
Oh yeah.
And can you go a little more into that? Because as an admin, we know difficult conversations are coming up. Whether you like them or not, you're going to have one, probably more than one per day. But
whether you see it coming.
Yeah. The other part is that you don't always know them. Some of them it's just you're in the middle of something and the door knocks and you're like, hey, can I talk to you for a quick second? And you're like, sure. And then all of a sudden, maybe the union rep comes in with him. You're like, oh, okay, it's that conversation. Let's see what we're doing here. But it's more of talk a little bit about that, about the avoiding difficult conversations.
Yeah, and this is something that I've learned to get better at as well. But as an administrator, you can't avoid difficult conversations. And sometimes you have to wait for the right time. You have to think about the right setting. Is it going to be in their classroom? Is it going to be in your office? How are we going to navigate this conversation? What's the best setting? What's the best time frame for this? Is it going to be on their turf? Is it going to be on my turf? And how are we going to navigate this conversation? But you have to have it. You have to have those difficult conversations. And this is how I lead this. This is how I tell my team. I said, we always start a difficult conversation with the phrase, help me understand. Help me understand is a conversation starter. The most difficult thing about a difficult conversation is starting it. And so the phrase, help me understand, is a great conversation starter. But my team also knows that help me understand. My team knows that help me understand is code for what the, right? And so I love it. It always brings a smile to my face when I walk down this hallway and I hear one of my associate principals talking to a staff member and I hear them say, "Help me understand," because I know in their mind they're thinking.
Yep.
And so the other thing that I've learned is that depending on the concern, depending on the issue, depending on what's going on, you think about the airspace in the room. So this is I think a tool that has helped me be more intentional about those conversations. So you think about the airspace, and if 100% represents the total airspace in the room, in your office, you need to navigate that conversation on a percentage of that airspace. So in this conversation, how much of this airspace needs to be me talking, and how much of this airspace needs to be the staff member talking? So sometimes it's a help me understand, and I need to kind of sit back and listen and take notes. And I need to let them have 70% of that airspace because I need to find out what's going on. And I'm only going to have 30% of that airspace, and it's going to be more of a listening tone. Now, there are other times when I have maybe more of the story, and I walk into that meeting and I say, you know what, 90% of this airspace is going to be me talking. And I'm going to give you 10% of my listening, but here's where we are, because I can't defend this. Does that make sense? And so that airspace concept has really helped me be more intentional about walking into those conversations. And I still think it's important to listen and seek to understand, because the other thing that is kind of intertwined in those conversations is having that suffering contest. So I don't know if you can edit that pause there, but it's being indifferent or having that suffering contest with somebody. You know, I was a teacher for 20 years, and I had AP Lit and 150 essays to grade, and I was head football coach. And so when somebody comes and complains to me that they don't have enough time to do their job, it's hard for me sometimes to have sympathy because of what I come from. But I have learned I can't share that, because they're coming from a different space. They're coming from a different background. They're coming from a different skill set. They're coming from a different mindset, a family's background, all the other things. And you can't get into a suffering contest with people. You need to listen with empathy and really seek to understand their perspective. But in those difficult conversations, I find that airspace, just understanding that concept in your mind. And there's sometimes when I'll have one of my APs or my athletic director will come into my office first, and I'll say, hey, I'm going to own about 70% of this airspace today, and we're going to give this person about 30%. And my team knows what that means.
What about that statement of the courage to say no? So can you give me a little more on that? Because I think about that statement too. Because, you know, I understand like the idea, sometimes you got to say no to a staff member, but I always think about that a word no and what it sometimes can do.
Yeah.
So go a little bit into that.
Those of us that lived through COVID, we said no a lot. We said no more than we've ever said in our entire career during COVID, right? Goodness. So sometimes I like to blur that out of my mind a little bit, but yeah. So saying no, you have to have the courage to say no, and sometimes those are hard conversations too. But here's a great example. So Jasmine is one of my favorite people. She's one of my counselors, and she early on was the person that I wanted to help lead my BSU. She's awesome. One of my favorite people. And she came to me and I kind of charged her. I said, Jasmine, I need you to take this on and make it great. And she's like, Todd, I got you. We're going to do this. And we were about a year and a half in, and she came to me. She's like, Todd, we don't have any time to meet with our students. Most of our students ride the bus, or they have athletics after school, or they're unavailable to meet after school. We can't meet with them before school. We don't have any time for them to meet. And she wanted to use our intervention time, our academic intervention time, our MTSS time, to meet with the Black Student Union. And this is something I go, Jasmine, I need you to make this go, right? She's the one I asked to do this. And she wanted to use that intervention time to do it. And I go, Jasmine, we can't do that. I said, no. I said, that is dedicated to closing our achievement gap, improving our graduation rate. We have to focus on the academics during that time. We can't use it for clubs. And if I use it for BSU, then I've got to be able to use it for student council and NHS and all these other things that want to happen as well and are good things. But this is sacred academic time, and we need to keep true to that. And had to tell her no. And it was tough because I had put it on her to make this thing grow. And what we had to end up doing was find a new sponsor that could meet with them during our late start. Because during our late start, that's when our certified staff members collaborate for their PLC time. And that's in the negotiated agreement that our certified staff members cannot be with students during that time. So we had to lean into getting one of our football coaches, who was a Rule 10 coach, he was a classified staff member, to sponsor our Black Student Union at the time. So I had to shift my theory and my plan because I wanted Jasmine to lead this thing, but it wasn't going to work and it wasn't going to grow just with the meeting time. So with our late start, we were able to use a different sponsor to help it grow and make it grow. And so that's just an example of how you have to have the courage to say no, even though I wanted to say yes with all my heart. I think there's a lot of those daily scenarios where you just got to stay true to practices and protocols, but also, hey, if I say yes to this, what's the next thing that's going to come, right? So you got to have a balance there, and everything's different and everything's unique, but that's just one example of having the courage to say no.
Thank you. And I appreciate the example. I love that example because we empower people to do things, and we've got to be able to, hold fast to the things that must be done and allow people to be creative. But at the same time, there are some things that have to take priority in certain situations. It's also an example that it wasn't a simple task. Something as simple as we've got to find a time for kids to meet, is not always cut and dry and quick and easy. And it would have been a perfect opportunity if it wasn't something that you truly were committed to say, okay, well, we can't do that right now. Or let me put this on the back burner and focus on some other things, and we'll come back around to this, which has happened, to all of us so many times. And then years later, somebody will resuggest it, and you're like, that was a great idea 3 years ago. Why didn't we do it?
Yeah.
So I do want to shift a little bit. So I saw this this thing where you talked about the difference between kind leaders and nice leaders. And it made me think, because I always say, I'm gonna get in trouble. I can already see the comments online. So I always say that the Northeast, we are kind, but we're not nice. And I say on the West Coast, California in particular, they are nice, but they're not kind. Just in general, right? So, all right, Cali, West Coast, go ahead, get me in the comments. But that's Des. That's not Dr. Dain. But Dr. Dain, tell us what you mean when you say the difference, when you talk about the difference between kind leaders and nice leaders.
Yeah, so that's when you have to say no in those situations. You have to have tough conversations, having the courage to say no. That's the difference between being kind and being nice. I mean, a lot of it comes from Brene Brown, clear is kind. And I would kind of connected with this because a few years ago when I was named the Kansas Principal of the Year, they interviewed some students, and they say, "Hey, what do you think about Dr. Dain? You know, how would you describe Dr. Dain?" And one student, and I'm not even sure that I had individually had a conversation with the student before, but the student made the comment, says, "Dr. Dain is the perfect combination of kind and scary." I thought to myself, I'm like, is that a compliment? I said, well, I'm not sure that was my intention, but I think it works for what I wanted students to feel. Like they know that I'm kind and I care about them, but they also know, look, we have some structures in place and we have some expectations that you're going to live up to. And so I kind of fall into that role as well in my dealings, because I want kids to know that I love them. I want teachers to know that I love them and support them. Right. And I think I think sometimes we have those conversations with staff members, even because I care about you, I need you to change what you're doing. I need you to change this habit. And let me be very clear about this scenario, this situation, what's going on, what happened, and what can't happen moving forward, or whatever the scenario is. And I think that's when I've learned it's okay to be kind and be truthful and honest with people, and not just say, well, it's okay. I'm just going to give you an out. I'm just going to give you an okay. Don't worry about it. Just don't do it next time, or something like that. So I think clear as kind is connected to that phrase as well. And I think you can say no and be kind. I think you can have difficult conversations and be kind. I think you can say, you know what, Mr. Jones, I love you, but I can't defend what you're doing right now in the classroom, or what you did in the classroom, or with a student, or whatever the scenario was. And to be honest with you, I don't have very many of those. But I think clear as kind is what's connected to that. And being nice, a lot of times you're sugarcoating it and you're not being clear and you're not being honest.
You had one piece of advice for people looking to become an admin or about to walk into a new position, new job, something like that, to develop culture. What is that one piece of advice? Yeah.
So to be honest with you, I've had a lot of opportunities to speak at aspiring principals forums and new principal workshops and other things. And aspiring leaders will ask me, or new principals will ask me, principals that are in their first year, and they'll ask me, like, Dr. Dain, the morale in my building is so low. The teachers are it seems like they're miserable. The staff is miserable. And what do I do? And my response is always the same. My response is this: find the good and celebrate it obnoxiously. There's good happening in your building. There's good happening in your classrooms. There's good happening with your students. There's good happening with your staff. Find the good and celebrate it as much as you can. Find as many different ways to celebrate the good, because it's happening in our schools. And we have people in our country that like to attack schools because they're an easy target for a lot of things. And sometimes it's easy to kind of lean into some of that negativity. And I just try to outweigh any of the negative with as much positive that I can find. And I'm a social media junkie too. And so I just try to, I know that there's some negative things on social media, but I try to outweigh all of the negative with as much positive that I can post on social media. I'm getting better at TikTok. I used to be a Twitter junkie, and then it became X, and I didn't like calling myself an X junkie. And so that kind of changed, and X kind of changed. And so now I'm on Instagram and TikTok. My daughter's helping me with TikTok a little bit, but.
That's great. Well, an hour has already gone by.
Okay.
We thank you for being a part of this conversation. It flies when it's a great conversation. Do you have any final words?
No, sir. I would just say, I appreciate the work that you guys are doing, and I appreciate the work that our principals are doing across the country. And I've said this before, and I truly believe it, that schools are the only place in America, I think, where you find the truth every day, and you see the truth every day. It's hard to say what's happening outside of our schools, but so much of the time, what we do every day with our young people is the work that's going to impact our future, and it's the work that's going to impact our young people. And so keep fighting that good fight to everyone. And I appreciate the opportunity. And like I shared and touched on before, sometimes in our work as adults, we need to get out of the way and let the young people lead.
Very true words. Des, any final words?
Just keep it kind and scary.
I may not live that down. I don't know.
Listen, I wouldn't want to live that down. That's a great combination right there.
Listen,
it's okay.
If you know anything about me, if someone said that to me, I'd have a T-shirt the next week.
Yeah. That's good.
Dr. Dain, thank you so much again for joining us today. We truly enjoy the conversations. As I mentioned earlier, before we started our recording, this is professional learning for myself and for Des on a Friday after a long week, getting a chance to talk with great people across the nation about education, something we all love, and hearing the success stories that are coming from it. It's uplifting, and it's always something that at least lets you walk into the weekend with a smile, knowing there's others out there that are trying to do it too, because we know in our jobs, it sometimes can feel heavy. We all got things going on. We're all dealing with things, but just know there's someone else dealing with it too, and they're leaving with that smile, and they're thinking about the good things that are happening. We're all always just trying to be better every day, and we're always got each other out there to go and help. And I just think it's something always great, and getting a chance to talk to great human beings like yourself, getting a chance to do the things that you're doing is a great way. It helps me smile, move myself into the weekend. So I thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today. Des, as always, I love our conversations, man. It's a great way to end into the weekend. With that, school's out.
You all will be missed. Until then, I gotta blow you a kiss. Until we meet again on that other side, this my rhyme. We all love you to the end of this time, always. Know this, you all will be missed. Until then, I gotta blow you a kiss. Until we meet again on that other side, this my rhyme. We all love you to the end of this time, always.